In the first week, we talked about the three models of agricultural education, which are instruction, FFA, and SAE. And we talked about FFA, and instruction is kind of self-explanatory. It's what you're doing right now. So now it's time to talk about SAE, which stands for Supervised Agricultural Experience. The purpose of the SAE is to gain work experience in agriculture, some career in agriculture, regardless of what that is, and build life skills. There are certain skills that you need and will have to use no matter what job you're in, and that's part of what the SAE does, is it helps you build those skills that you need in a career. It is a project that is completed outside of class time that deals with any sort of division of agriculture. That can be plants, it can be animals, it could be an agricultural business, or an agriculture-based science experiment or research project. There are 6 major types of SAE projects, and then there's one that's kind of an additional one, but the first major type that we're going to talk about is entrepreneurship, and this is essentially where you are running your own business. So it's planning, implementing, and operating and assuming financial risks in some sort of agricultural business or farming activity. So, for example, raising pigs, or growing plants and selling them at the farmer's market, or raising chickens and selling their eggs at the farmer's market, or what have you. It's basically where you're running your own company. Examples of this would be raising plants to sell, owning a lawn maintenance business, or owning a farm supply store. Items to include in the record book. So the record book is the SAE record book. That's what they're referring to here. And that really is just evidence of your project, is all the record book is. But things to include for entrepreneurship would be the type of enterprise or the type of business, the amount of items that were bought or sold through this business, any expenses that you might have, the income of your business, efficiency factors, and other things along those lines. Experimental is the next type of project that we're going to look at, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is planning and conducting an agricultural experiment using the scientific process, also known as the scientific method. Examples of these would be comparing different fertilizer rates on plants. I did have a student once that I thought this was kind of fun. She raised 2 plants basically in the same setting, except that one plant she played classical music to, and the other one she played screamo, and she tried to determine if that had an effect on how the plants grew. Items to include in the record book for this particular type of SAE would be a review of literature. Anytime that you do an experiment, you should review literature. So you should actually go out online and figure out, has anyone done this experiment before? And if so, what were their findings? So review of literature would be the first thing. Your hypothesis or your guess as to what's going to happen. Data log, your findings, and then your recommendations. So the difference between findings and recommendations would be, I found that classical music played to plants allowed them to grow bigger than a plant that was played screamo. Sounds great. What's your recommendation then? If you want your plant to grow better, play them classical music instead of screamo. That would be the difference between the findings and the recommendations. The findings is what you actually observed, and then your recommendation is then based on those findings. Okay, analytical. Analytical is basically a research project, but it is not an experiment. So if someone's doing a project that is a research-based project without being an experiment, it's an analytical project. So it's identifying some sort of agricultural problem that can't be solved by experiments. It does include designing a plan to investigate and analyze the problem. The prime example of this would be making a marketing display to put out, say, at Hudson's or something like that, to encourage people to come into the business. Items to include in the record book would be the title of your activity or project, identification of the problem, any background information on the problem that you might have, steps to solve the problem, your project log of what you actually did, the steps that you took to solve the problem, your results, and any recommendations based on those results. Placement. So placement is actually placing students in jobs outside of the regular classroom hours. Many students already have a job, so if that's something that they're already doing, a lot of times I let them use their job, regardless of what it is, as their SAE project. It just makes things easier. But a placement project could be paid or unpaid. So if you're already volunteering somewhere, that would be another easy way to get project hours. Examples of this one would be working at a farm supply store. So I actually have had a student that worked at Hudson's Hardware, working in a greenhouse, or working for a landscape company. I've had a couple kids do that too. Items to include in the record book for this one would be a training agreement signed by the student, the teacher, the employer, and the parent or guardian, basically stating the roles everyone's going to play and making sure that the expectations of the project are being met and the student's not being taken advantage of, basically. Record of work. So what did you do? When were you there? How long did you work? That sort of thing. The hours, of course, and then also your income if there is any. Exploratory. This one a lot of times gets confused with placement, because exploratory is when a student goes and actually shadows someone in a particular career, but you're not actually working, if that makes sense. So this is really a way for students to learn about agriculture, become aware of possible careers through agriculture, and really it's just time that is spent shadowing someone, following someone around. The easiest example of this one that I can think of off the top of my head is a lot of people choose to shadow a vet, which is great. I've also had a student shadow a farrier who's a horseshoer, so that was pretty cool. Pretty much anybody that works in a job that you find intriguing, that would be a good way to go for a project. Examples would be attending a career day, interviewing a veterinarian. I would prefer if you'd actually go and walk around with them and shadow for a day, or assisting a horse owner just to kind of see what their average day-to-day life is like. Items to include in the record book for this one would be the date that you shadowed, any activities that you saw, observations you had, comments, and then of course your hours. Improvement is the next major type of SAE that we're going to talk about, and this is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You are making improvements to something. So series of activities that could improve the value or appearance of your workplace, if you have one, your school, your home, or your community. It could also be improving the efficiency of a business or enterprise, or the living conditions of your family. So, for example, I had some students, I think it was last semester actually, they built a new set of stairs off the deck so that the stairs were no longer dangerous. You can also build a fence for animals or something like that. Other examples would be computerizing records. If there is a business out there that is still using paper pencil records and you figure out a way to computerize them, that would be considered an improvement project. Remodeling a building or repairing equipment would also be examples. Items to include for the record book on this one would be the date that you actually started the improvement project, the date that it was finished, what you actually did for the improvement activity, and then, of course, the steps or tasks that were involved in the project, the hours, and your costs. And this is the last type of SAE we're going to talk about. This is actually a 7th type. It's not really a major type, but it is a supplementary SAE, and this is basically just like, say you get to the end of your project, and like at Clayton, we require you to work on your project for 10 hours. Okay, well, you get done with your project and you've only put in 9. You could do a supplementary SAE to make up that 1 hour. And the supplementary is just performing one specific skill outside of normal class time. The skill is not necessarily related to the major SAE. It, of course, can be, but normally it is taught in an agricultural program. It could involve experiential learning, but really it's just contributing to your skills that you learn in the agricultural program. Examples of this would be pruning a tree. You could stake tomatoes, You could change your oil. Another one that I tend to recommend would be like grooming a horse. Like that is definitely taught in my equine science class, and you can get it done. Most of the time these projects require less than a day's worth of work. It's, maybe an hour. Doesn't really require a whole bunch of series of steps, but it's just one activity that you do just to kind of make up any extra hours that you might need. Items to include on the record book on this one would be the date that you performed the activity, what you actually did, any comments you might have about it, and then the hours it took you. Alright, so everyone always asks, why do we talk about FFA, and why do we talk about SAEs, and what's so important about it? And so really, why should you have an SAE? The biggest thing is to develop job skills and employment skills. Earning money is a big perk, especially if you have a paying job. You can also win FFA proficiency awards. So proficiency awards are basically awards that are based on your SAE project, and they measure your proficiency level within that division of agriculture that you're working in. You can, of course, develop skills to start your own business, especially if you're raising something or growing something and then selling it at the farmer's market. It also allows you to learn about careers, and it also helps you develop those skills that you can really apply anywhere, whether that be college or work or wherever. Also teaches you how to keep accurate records, because you have to keep track of what you did and the hours you spent and all that stuff. And it also improves your decision-making skills. So for the independent study portion of this course, I don't require you to do an SAE. Since you're an online student, you don't have to do one. But if you would like to pursue something, of course, just let me know, and I will be more than happy to work with you on that. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email or reach out to me at any time. Otherwise, thanks for watching.